Everyone chuckled when a 19-year-old entered court unaccompanied, until he disclosed that he was more intelligent than the entirety of them. The courtroom was abuzz with the quiet murmurs of restless spectators, whose attention was constantly shifted between the imposing judge at the bench and the young man standing uneasily by the defense table. The tension in the air today was unusually charged, despite the fact that the walls of the Kingsford County Courthouse bore the weight of 100 past verdicts. Adrian Brooks, a 19-year-old with a slender, unassuming appearance, was the focus of attention, donning a pair of scuffed sneakers and an ill-fitting shirt. He held a few unkempt documents in his hands, and the pressure caused his knuckles to whiten. Judge Barbara Stone, a name that is synonymous with authority and harsh rebukes, sat behind the bench. Her reputation as a straightforward jurist was established prior to her arrival. She was not one to pass words, and her courtroom was not conducive to theatrics or justifications. To her, this case appeared to be trivial. An additional youthful individual is squandering the court's time. She did not conceal her contempt for Adrian as she gazed at him through her spectacles. "Mr. Brooks," she began, her tone trembling, "you are aware that the court does not tolerate individuals who arrive unprepared, are you not?" Adrian cleared his larynx, his voice trembling slightly. "Yes, Your Honor. I have the ability to." The judge's subtle smirk and the faint murmur from the gallery were not lost on him. The appearance of an individual who had already determined the outcome prior to the commencement of the proceedings was evident. Barbara folded her arms and reclined in her chair. "Excellently. Mr. Brooks, proceed. Let's examine your capabilities." It appeared to be a case that was doomed to fail from the outset. Adrian, who was representing himself in a trivial traffic dispute, appeared to have entered the incorrect room. However, the secret that was dismissed as naivety by all was something far more remarkable, a secret that would unravel before their very eyes. Although Adrian opened his mouth to speak, the subsequent events left the audience in a state of stunned stillness. Adrian's fingers contracted as he inhaled deeply, encircling the edges of his documents. The room's weight was pressing on him, as hundreds of eyes scrutinized, doubted, and judged him. Judge Stone's impatience was palpable as she drummed her pen against the desk. "Mr. Brooks," she said, angling an eyebrow, "if you are not prepared to continue, I will be compelled to dismiss this case. Do you comprehend that?" A faint wave of amusement rippled throughout the gallery. Adrian's voice remained steady, despite the anxieties that were visible on his face, as he lifted his gaze. "Your Honor, I am prepared." Barbara exhaled and signaled for him to commence. Subsequently, "Proceed." Adrian advanced. The subdued courtroom was echoed by the shuffle of his worn sneakers. He cast a fleeting glimpse at the opposition, a seasoned attorney, whose confident demeanor was etched with decades of experience. Adrian received a dismissive expression from the man, as if to convey that the situation would be resolved expeditiously. Adrian commenced his account of the incident that resulted in his court appearance, a speeding citation that was contested. However, rather than attempting to articulate a generic defense, he provided a detailed account of the events, including the officer's precise location, road conditions, and timestamps at the time the citation was issued. His delivery was deliberate, and although his demeanor remained modest, his words were accompanied by an unmistakable sense of confidence. The judge's pen slowed as she wrote notes, and she slightly leaned forward. Adrian continued by citing a statute from the California Vehicle Code, with remarkable precision. "Your Honor, the method employed to ascertain my speed may not be admissible under the conditions outlined in Section 40802(b). The brow of Judge Stone furrowed. She had not anticipated that he would retrieve a particular statute, much less employ it effectively. The courtroom, too, began to undergo a transformation. Mild amusement evolved into silent intrigue. The opposing attorney interrupted by clearing his throat. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant. This case is not subject to the statute." Adrian maintained his composure. "With all due respect, it is applicable. Additionally, if it is permissible," he proceeded to the evidence table and extracted a diagram that he had independently created. Although it was not visually striking, it was meticulously detailed, with every angle and distance meticulously considered. This diagram illustrates the reason why the radar used was unable to accurately measure my speed from the officer's vantage point. Judge Stone blinking, torn between genuine disbelief and skepticism. Adrian had just persuasively contested the opposing counsel's expertise. However, Adrian was not yet finished, as he returned to the gallery. This was merely the commencement of his legal proceedings. The courtroom, which had been agitated moments prior, was enveloped in a silence that was tangible. Adrian briefly glanced around, his eyes momentarily meeting the curious gazes of the gallery, before refocusing on the judge. A quiet confidence appeared to emerge with each word, as he began to stabilize his voice. "Your Honor," he continued, his tone now resolute, "the credibility of the evidence presented is the bedrock of this case. The allegation against me is flawed if the evidence is flawed." He addressed the opposing counsel with a respectful yet pointed tone. "I would like to inquire whether the prosecution can verify the calibration of the radar gun that was employed during the stop." The experienced attorney, evidently taken aback, adjusted in his seat. "We do not have that documentation readily available, Your Honor. However, it is a standard procedure, so..." Adrian raised his hand slightly, not to interrupt, but to request permission to continue. Judge Stone, her curiosity now aroused, nodded. Adrian responded, "Standard procedure is not proof. The law necessitates verification, not assumptions. The evidence cannot be regarded as reliable in the absence of the calibration record." The gallery's murmurs intensified. People murmured among themselves, no longer laughing at the young man, who had entered the room with an appearance that suggested he did not belong. Judge Stone appeared to pause before addressing him once more. "Mr. Brooks," she said, her voice becoming more subdued than before, "you appear to possess a more profound comprehension of legal procedures than the majority. From which source did you acquire this knowledge?" Adrian hesitated briefly before uttering, "I have been studying law since the age of 13, Your Honor. I successfully completed the bar exam last year." The courtroom reverberated with gasps. Even the opposing attorney's eyebrows were raised in disbelief. Judge Stone's expression was difficult to interpret as she leaned forward. "You are informing me that you are a licensed attorney. What is your age?" "Yes, Your Honor. I have always been passionate about the law." Although Adrian paused, he glanced down at his documents before looking back up, his voice unyielding. "I am also aware of the way in which I am perceived by others when I enter a room. I am presumed to be an outsider." For the first time, the judge's demeanor changed as she sat up in her chair. Her expression transitioned from uncertainty to reverence. Adrian continued to present additional evidence, and meticulously dismantle the opposing arguments. He articulated legal precedent in a manner that had even the most skeptical spectators nodding along, referencing case law with ease. He conducted a cross-examination of the officer's report, identifying inconsistencies in the narrative. He was met with either stunned silence or murmurs of approbation for each point he made. Nevertheless, a single query persisted as the courtroom awed at Adrian's brilliance. To what extent could he push this case, and the preconceived notions that had been made about him? The room's tension reached its zenith as Adrian delivered his concluding argument. He stood with his back erect, his voice unyielding, and his demeanor now emanated the quiet authority of an individual who was significantly older than his years. The courtroom, which was previously characterized by dismissive giggles and skeptical glances, now hung on his every word. Adrian addressed the court with a composed yet authoritative demeanor. "Your Honor, this case is not merely a matter of a speeding ticket. It is about equity, about guaranteeing that all individuals, irrespective of their age or appearance, are granted the same level of justice." The final murmurs in the gallery were silenced by the force of his words. As she examined Adrian, Judge Stone leaned forward, her jaw resting on her hand. Although her eyes remained critical, her keen demeanor had softened significantly. "Mr. Brooks, what is the specific proposal you are making?" Adrian took a deep inhale to calm himself. "I am suggesting that the evidence presented is not only unreliable, but it also violates the principles of due process. The radar's accuracy is uncertain in the absence of accurate calibration records. The officer's testimony is inadequate in the absence of consistent reporting. Additionally, this matter should not be pursued in the absence of clear evidence." The opposing counsel abruptly stood, his voice tinged with frustration. "Your Honor, this is absurd. He is manipulating technicalities to achieve." Judge Stone raised his hand, effectively silencing him. "Sit down, counselor," she replied with firmness. Her eyes refocused on Adrian. "Continue." Adrian raised his papers and nodded. "I have drafted a motion to dismiss the charges in light of these deficiencies. The law is not concerned with minutiae, it is concerned with justice, evidence and facts." The room appeared to be in a state of pause for a brief period. Judge Stone perused the motion with a furrowed brow, flicking through its pages. Ultimately, she set it down and gazed upward at Adrian. She began, but her voice faltered. She cleared her throat and adjusted her spectacles. This is exceedingly well organized. Mr. Brooks, your performance exceeds that of the majority of first-year attorneys. The gallery once more burst into whispers, however they were quickly subdued by Judge Stone's swift rap of his gavel. She addressed the opposing attorney, who appeared visibly agitated. Counselor, do you have a counter-argument? The counsel stood, but his hesitation was apparent. No, Your Honor. The defense has made a compelling case. Adrian briefly regained Judge Stone's attention. The sternness that was customary for her subsided. Mr. Brooks, she addressed him, her tone suffused with an unexpected affection. I erred in my assessment of you upon your initial arrival in this courtroom. You have not only exhibited a comprehensive comprehension of the law, however, they have also served as a reminder of its intended purpose. I am granting your motion to dismiss the charges. The room was filled with the echo of her gavel, which was followed by a moment of startled silence. Then a gradual ripple of acclaim began to spread throughout the gallery, intensifying as the audience rose to their feet. Adrian's expression was a combination of relief and disbelief as he gazed around. Judge Stone also stood, her expression unintelligible. Court is adjourned, she announced prior to her departure from the bench. However, she halted and extended her hand as she passed Adrian. Mr. Brooks, you have a promising future ahead of you. Do not be swayed by any individual's opinion. Despite the tumult of emotions, Adrian maintained his composure as he shook her hand. Your Honor, I am extremely grateful. Your assistance is greatly appreciated. However, Adrian was unaware of this fact as he exited the courtroom that day. This was merely the beginning of a voyage that would extend far beyond those confines, inspiring and challenging. The internal chatter followed Adrian like a wave as soon as he exited the courtroom. The young man immediately captivated the attention of reporters who had been loitering in the courthouse vestibule. Microphones were directed toward him as cameras flashed. He was taken aback by the abrupt attention and hesitated. Adrian Brooks, is it accurate that you passed the bar at the age of 18? One reporter was summoned. Another individual exclaimed, did you anticipate winning today? Adrian gestured for silence by raising his hand. Although his pride was evident in a slight smile, his demeanor was composed. He stated, I arrived here to defend myself, as would any other individual. I did not anticipate anything other than fairness, and that is precisely what I received. His humility only served to heighten the suspense. The courtroom footage of his closing argument was trending on social media within hours, garnering millions of views. Comments varied from admiration for his legal acumen to indignation regarding the judge's initial treatment of him. Adrian's narrative was no longer restricted to Kingsford County. It had become a national phenomenon. After returning home, Lorraine, Adrian's mother, observed the news coverage with a combination of pride and apprehension. She was always aware that her son was exceptional. However, she was also aware that society frequently treated young males like him. Lorraine's phone was inundated with calls from family and friends as reporters meticulously examined every aspect of the case, and even acquaintances extending their congratulations. Mom, Adrian said gently as he entered the house. His fatigued gaze collided with hers. Lorraine enveloped him in a close embrace, her voice resonating with emotion. You were truly remarkable, Adrian. I sincerely hope that they recognize you for the individual you are today. However, the narrative did not conclude at that point. With the ubiquitous attention came both opportunities and challenges. Internship proposals were extended by law firms. Adrian was emphasized by advocacy organizations as a representation of perseverance and the dismantling of stereotypes. At the same time, his capabilities were questioned by skeptics, framing his success as a fortunate anomaly, rather than the outcome of hard labor and brilliance. In the interim, Judge Barbara Stone encountered her own realization. She freely acknowledged that she had underestimated Adrian during interviews, utilizing the experience as a personal wake-up call. That young man served as a reminder of the reason I pursued this field in the first place. She disclosed this information to a single journalist. Assumptions should never be the basis for justice. The case, which originated as a straightforward traffic dispute, had incited a more extensive dialogue about the influence of challenging expectations, perseverance and bias. However,
Adrian discreetly prepared for the events that would follow, even as the world debated his narrative. Because for him, this was merely the initial step toward a much more significant endeavor. Adrian's narrative did not simply dissipate into obscurity as yet another viral moment. It persisted in classrooms, courtrooms and conversations throughout the nation. The brilliance of his legal knowledge was not the only topic of discussion. However, the more profound issues that his case revealed, the frequency with which society evaluated individuals based on their appearance, age or circumstances, prior to affording them the opportunity to demonstrate their capabilities. Adrian's triumph in court was not solely about his reputation. It was intended to demonstrate that intelligence, determination and talent could originate from any source. Adrian stated in an interview, "If we exclusively concentrate on the limitations of an individual, we will never be able to observe their true capabilities." Another noteworthy observation was Judge Stone's transformation. She was markedly more attentive in subsequent instances, taking the time to listen attentively, rather than relying on her initial impressions. During one interview, she contemplated, "That day in court taught me more than any number of years on the bench could have." Adrian Brooks demonstrated to me the efficacy of resilience, humility and preparation. He also reminded me to look beyond the superficial. The moral of Adrian's narrative was straightforward yet profound for both readers and viewers. Fairness necessitates effort, while assumptions are effortless. We establish a conducive environment for others to flourish by engaging in more active listening and less judgmental behavior, and to allow their distinctive talents to bloom. Adrian's perseverance became a symbol, not exclusively for youthful lawyers who aspire to become lawyers, however, for anyone who has ever been undervalued. Schools extended invitations to him to deliver a speech. Invitations were extended by law firms. Also, he was perceived as evidence by young people throughout the nation that brilliance could manifest in the most unlikely of locations. However, Adrian refrained from being influenced by his celebrity status. He maintained his concentration on his future, determined to leverage his expanding platform to motivate others to confront the obstacles that have been erected in their way. Adrian Brooks persisted in his pursuit of his goals for months following the courtroom spectacle, unaffected by the scrutiny or attention. He regarded his newly acquired platform as a duty, utilizing it to promote equitable treatment and mentor youthful individuals, and serve as a reminder to others that success is contingent upon diligence and forethought, not merely an opportunity. Adrian's voyage was succinctly summarized in a sincere address at a community event. "I did not enter that courtroom with the intention of proving anyone wrong. I entered the building to substantiate my assertion. It is a fact that we all experience instances in which others question our abilities. However, those moments are not barriers, they are portals that are awaiting an opening." Adrian maintained his modesty amid the audience's spontaneous ovation. The journey was far from over to him. He intended to further his education, strive for justice, and assist in the realization of the potential of others. His narrative served as an indicator of optimism, a reminder that talent has the potential to transcend prejudice, and that the worth of no one should be assessed at face value. It is a call to action for the audience who hears Adrian's narrative. Take a moment to question your preconceived notions about others. The next time you encounter an individual, and believe you have already ascertained their narrative, inquire as to what you may be overlooking. Adrian's journey was not about achieving a courtroom victory. It was about the force of defying expectations, self-belief and resilience. Also, with each forward movement, he harbored the aspiration that his narrative would motivate others to pursue their own. If Adrian's narrative resonated with you, please consider sharing it with a person who requires it. Please remember to subscribe to our channel for additional stories that inspire and challenge, and serve as a reminder of the extraordinary potential that resides within each of us.